I'm gonna test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. Give me some audio.
Okay, so a bear walks into the bar.
All right, so we're good to go. We're recording. I got it covered. Welcome.
So you can edit this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So
Welcome.
you can edit this stuff, right?
Yeah. I love it.
So you can edit this stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you could have a report on those comments. Now, we're not talking about, a whole huge thing here. These are just ideas that you can adapt and modify to your business, your employees.
Yeah, so I have 3 videos being recorded. One that has both of us on the screen, and one just on me, and one just on you. So we have all 3 covered.
Take a breath. It's fine, Bob.
I love it. Well, why don't you do this? Why don't you first introduce yourself, and so that everybody out there knows who Robert from Omaha is.
Okay. Well, I am a 70-year-old, believe it or not, electrical enthusiast. I love the electrical trade and all of the things that go with it. I'm especially concerned with not just electrical code, but electrical safety. Current moves at the speed of light, and so we need to know ahead of time and plan ahead of time the things that we're going to do, because when something happens, not if, when something happens, you are not going to be able to respond. And notice I said respond, not react. And you won't even be able to react because things happen so quickly in milliseconds. So it's very, very important to understand the electrical industry, electrical theory, and the thrust of electrical safety. Well, this is why we have electrical safety. I learned a long time ago. Do you know what drives codes and standards? What would you guess drives?
What drives codes? I'd say statistics.
Statistics. Yep. Statistics don't lie, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, it is what it is. And the statistics are horrendous. Now they're getting better. And they're getting better because of things like this Shock Week and Shock Month and Electrical Safety Month. And this is only 1 month out of 12. Okay. But what we're learning is we need to give this constant attention, consciously and subconsciously, because it's that important. We can either finish the job and go home at the end of the day, or we can be planning a funeral.
And you know what? Here's what I think. The subconscious side of it, of this discussion is very similar. I liken it to seatbelts. I remember when I was a kid, nobody wore their seatbelts. It was like, it bothered you, it rubbed your neck. There were all these reasons why we wouldn't wear seatbelts. Now,
I didn't wear it because it made my hips look big.
Okay. So, but now I get into a vehicle and I don't feel comfortable without wearing the seatbelt. It's like it's become a part of the culture. And unfortunately, the opportunity in the electrical industry is that we are trying to change that culture, and we need to get all of our ducks in a row so that eventually the safe solution, or the safety, your personal protective equipment, or the making sure you have an extension cord that has ground fault circuit interrupter protection, GFCI protection, whatever, those become second nature and you don't think about
it. Yeah, absolutely. And it's come a long ways. We don't want people to get the wrong idea. It's coming a long ways. It's coming along nicely, but it could be better. And so it's kind of like turning a ship in the ocean. It'll take you 40 miles to make the curve, but you will eventually make the curve, right? And so by constant reminders And what tends to happen, I think, is these constant reminders wind up being seen as bothering you or constantly getting on you and this and that and the other.
Yeah.
Well, it's not. We got to figure out a way to present this so that the culture changes. Change is hard for people.
Yes.
One of the things on awareness that we're talking about here, it's on the hierarchy of risk control methods.
Yeah.
It is one of the methods. Now, there are things in that method that we're going to talk about, okay, that we can implement. But everyone needs to understand, first of all, what electrical safety is, okay, what awareness is, what are we talking about? You realize there's only one word in 70E, awareness, okay?
Yeah.
What does that mean? What is it? What does it mean? People, they think they know what it means, but they don't stop and think about it. And isn't it true that everything we're being trained to do is to stop and think ahead of time? What is the likelihood of occurrence? And what is the resultant outcome? What could it possibly be when something goes wrong? I keep training myself to not say if something goes wrong, because invariably it's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's got to be one of those things where you just have to accept I mean, once you accept the fact that, look, something's going to happen, and to your point, I want to manage risk. I want to manage the likelihood of that event happening. I want to reduce that likelihood, and I want to reduce the severity when it happens, right? So
not only how can we do that, but why should we do that? And what are the indicators that we need to consider? So first of all, what is electrical safety? Electrical safety is the set of practices and procedures to reduce the risk of injuries or fatalities due to electrical incidents.
Yeah.
Okay, it involves using safety equipment, proper training, and adherence to established rules and regulations. Okay, so I'm going to be quoting some things here. So if it looks like sound like I'm reading different things, I want to be accurate. Okay,
yeah.
So that's I did.
And
I
if
got
you have
tons of research.
if you have a reference, if like I'm looking for the hierarchy of risk control in 70E, but if you have a section reference, shout them out. I'll make sure that we have the title and whatnot, but
Right.
Try to shout them out whenever you can.
Well, interestingly, and this is by design, I'm sure, awareness is going to be tied to Annex Q. It just is. Okay?
Yeah.
Human performance. Because we're talking about not just situational awareness, not just conditional awareness, but we're talking about self-awareness. What do we know about ourselves? How are we going to respond? And there's two words that we deal with: react or respond. Now, if you're trained, like you go to boot camp to learn how to respond in a war, react in a war. Okay, if you're trained, then you're reacting, but responding is better because you have to think about it, take the time, and think about not just yourself, but your workman that's working with you.
Right.
The whole scenario. This takes a qualified person has to take this and understand this, the scope and the depth and so forth, to cover the base. And one little word, awareness, as a method. Sometimes that's all you've got. You've got to use all of those all the way down the line. And sometimes you might use more than one method, right? A combination of them. Well, if you don't know what awareness is or what that's talking about, how do you include that in the examination of it? So safety should be more than a priority. It should be a core value.
Yeah, and that's brought out in Article 110 with regard to the employer, the requirements that the employer place. They have to create that electrical the safety plan, and keeping safety at the top of the list. In fact, they moved 70E sections around to emphasize that point.
Yeah. And so showing people that, now most people wouldn't have paid attention to that. They just think it's in a different place. So it's by design.
Yeah, it's exactly
because
right.
we want first things first, right? And in covering this as an instructor, you want to make sure that you cover first things first. But when
Yeah.
we get to this point, safety awareness, and I'm going to read a couple of things here, is the habit of thinking about the possibility that someone can get hurt or property can be damaged before the task is started. Now, most of us are focused on people, but like you said before, property is part of the NEC and part of 70E and so forth, the protection of people and property from the hazards arising from the use of electricity. And it's more than just electricians. Anybody who interacts with electricity needs to have some form of training, some form of making you aware of what you're dealing
Exactly.
with. How many, and I'm not picking on anybody, but how many HVAC people take
Oh, yeah.
70E? How many people, well, even on a construction site, you've got the spider boxes, you got people interacting, it's standing on a concrete slab,
Yep.
best form of ground there is. And nobody's given attention to those that are plugging in and unplugging. And it could be somebody using a sweeping machine or something. They interact with electricity. So
Yeah.
being aware of that is what we're trying to highlight. And if they're thinking about it, most people don't even think about it, right?
Yeah.
Because nobody says anything about it.
Exactly, and that's the first part, is hazard awareness is such a critical piece of the puzzle, and I think very underrated, because we make an assumption, and that, well, I
Yeah.
know it's 120 volts, or I know it's 480 volts, or you may not know, and then
Yep.
I've had people, you mentioned HVAC, I've had people say, well, I do HVAC in residential dwelling units, 70E doesn't apply to me. Well, yeah, it does, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It applies to anybody that's interacting with electrons. Don't
Exactly.
care. They
Yeah,
don't. They
like,
don't say, "Oh, well, we're in a residential situation here. We're in HVAC. We're
right.
not going to act the way we
No.
usually do." So it's
Yep.
important from the standpoint that it's not enough just to put a safety plan together.
I
You
agree.
have to go deeper, and
Yes,
you
you
have
do.
to train in short periods, train smarter, not longer. And
Yeah.
so, in doing that, um, as an instructor, I feel it's my responsibility to try and reach people and to show them and motivate them to see that the proactive practice of protection, the proactive practice of protection should be ingrained in anybody who's working in construction or in the electrical field, right? I mean,
Mhm.
if everybody is focused on proactive protection of themselves, the equipment, and people around them, you could be working on a panel, and yeah, you've got your 10-foot boundaries or whatever all set up. But if
Yep.
you're working there and you're suited up, and when something happens, I mean, there's instances in Annex K where it shows that covers that have been blown off in an electrical arc flash or arc blast can travel 700 miles an hour. That's going to cover that 10-foot distance in a
Oh,
heartbeat,
absolutely.
and that poor cleaning guy is going to want. Those
Oh,
are things you want to think about when you're getting
yep.
ready to do a job, your job hazard analysis. And, you know, you don't have to worry about things like, okay, what if somebody flies over and drops a bomb? That's not realistic. Could happen, but it's not realistic. But there are
Well,
realistic things.
what you're dealing with when you say realistic, what you're talking there, in my opinion, is likelihood. The
Yes,
likelihood of that occurring. I mean, if you look at
yes,
statistics, how many times did you have that type of scenario? When the
hmm
likelihood is low, you've got to learn to prioritize and say, okay, or the likelihood isn't even there, right? You could make an argument that 1 in a billion, chance of that occurring. So we have to, and what you're doing is you're prioritizing based
yeah.
upon likelihood.
Um, Not advertising for anybody. Remember Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber when he asked
Yeah.
that girl, is there a chance, 1 in a million chance that I could go out with you? And she goes, it's 1 in a million. He goes, so there is a chance.
Chance. That's right. There is a
Well,
chance.
but with this, we're dealing with people's lives,
Yeah.
not just their life themselves, but their family and everybody. And we're dealing with the employer, his
Yeah.
business, and so forth. Something that happens, and we're not aware of this or don't take this into consideration, if we don't recognize the hazards, if we're not willing to take the action that's needed to
Yeah.
control or eliminate those hazards, what is that saying about us?
No, yeah,
you know,
absolutely right.
um,
Yeah.
but that's the thing. Even if we do recognize hazards and we are willing to take the action, how do we implement all that? Well, by being aware of what's available, by being aware of our surroundings, being aware of
Yeah.
70E, where to find it, being aware of who to call or who to talk to if we don't have the answer, and to be able to do that
Yeah.
before before we start work.
And that's the value of sitting down before your job hazard analysis, that whole process of identifying all the different hazards, and to your point, thinking outside the box. You can't just think, I've had this during a class of mine. We talked about the fact that 70E deals with electrical hazards, but on a job site, there are so many other hazards you need to think about, right? It's not just the electrical. It's you've got to pop up 10,000 feet and look at your overall objective, look at everybody who's on the job site, everybody who could be accidentally on the job site. How do we control that environment to control our risk and manage likelihood? Because we understand severity, or at least we should, be going in, understanding the severity of shock on the body, on the human body. We talk about arc flash and burns and all that stuff. But to understand that the best control you have is on likelihood.
Yeah. Yep.
It's critical.
And the best control in it, along with that, is you.
Yeah. Oh,
You have
absolutely.
control of your. You don't have control of anything else, but you have to be aware of
Yep.
what's possible. I enjoyed last time when you were talking with Derek about, okay, what if you've been to a celebration party the night before and you're
Yeah.
hungover and you come to work?
Oh, yeah.
Well, not just yourself, but what if you're the guy that's doing the task with you? You can see, okay, something's not quite right.
Yeah.
Is that important? Is that intruding on his privacy? Absolutely not. You're trying to save him and you and the boss
Absolutely.
and everybody else. And
Yes.
so if you're sick, things like that, and other things to be aware of. Now I looked up,
Now,
did a lot of research here. We got 6 ways in one of the research that we can promote workplace safety awareness. And we can talk about all these things, but as we're listing these, we need to be thinking about, first of all, what do I think of that? How do I feel about that? And then how
mhm,
can I relay that to others in such a way that they don't take offense or they don't think I'm trying to run their life or anything?
right.
Appeal to them, because it's the human nature that needs to change. Our
Yeah.
actions are not going to change if the employees don't buy in and if upper management doesn't buy in.
Absolutely
70E
right.
becomes our safety plan, just becomes a piece of paper that you know it's nice to reference.
Yep.
So one of the ways, among others, is to have marking and signage.
That's
Okay.
now you're in if in the hierarchy of risk control, I would put that in item in that risk. You have elimination, substitution,
Mhm.
engineering controls, and awareness. You're in
Yes.
awareness when we talk
Yes.
about signage. Yep.
Exactly. And that's the focus of this particular section here. Then
Hmm.
the next thing is to create posters that display safety policies. Now they don't have to be elaborate. They could be simple, but they can use colors and things like that to attract attention. Look at the posters that OSHA makes. They got different colors for different hazards and so forth. Okay.
Yep.
People tend to remember colors and then associate what that means with that rather than, have to go read a bottle or something like that. Um, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that anyway, but I'm saying this is an easier way. Have regular safety talks. Now, do we have job
Yeah.
box talks in the morning? Do we have somebody who manages those? You don't want to have a box talk on, say, for example, keeping your drill in order when you're going to work
Hmm.
on installing a receptacle. So Taylor, the person who is doing the job briefing and job planning should know what's going to be done for the day and focus on that, the reminders that's
And,
needed, right?
yep. And you know what else too? I think tailoring it to your audience, because we talk about we talk about a worker and talk about, these are the actions you're going to do through the day. But there is something to be said about the same type of, what do we call them, job talks or, uh,
Toolbox talks.
yeah. So
Yeah.
there is an opportunity even in senior and middle management, to have those same toolbox talks for those individuals. So you could, if just think, if you're going to have a leadership meeting in your organization and you require that the first thing that is discussed is giving an example of this of a safety procedure, a safety hazard. Maybe it's a hazard awareness that relates to the audience, right?
Yep.
You wouldn't talk to your senior leaders or your middle management about proper tool selection, but you would possibly talk to them about how do we instill procedures and policies? How do we recognize
Mhm.
employees for doing the right things or recognize when things aren't going wrong and how to handle those
Yeah.
situations so that we don't have a negative impact on safety. We have a positive impact on safety, and sometimes we can use what is going wrong as an example to say, here's what we need to do to go right. And it's not that you take that individual who maybe did something wrong because they didn't know. It's not you're amplifying that to say, look, this person was bad because of this. It demonstrates a lack of leadership and a lack of awareness, which is the
Hmm.
topic here, right? So
Yeah.
that's a
So
key.
can you, along those lines, can you imagine upper management sitting in on some of those
Oh yeah,
job talks? They come
sure.
down and they sit in, and they not only demonstrate that they're committed to their employees' safety,
Yeah,
but not just talking about things that have gone wrong, encourage what has gone right.
right.
Dwell on that. See, we've done this correctly. You're to be commended. And look at what it's done. It's done this for the company. It's done this. That is more
Yeah,
motivating people the right direction.
yeah,
Leading lagging indicators that comes to mind. These near misses are fine. And I got a
yeah.
question. If it was a near miss, does that mean they hit it?
Oh, that's a good question. It
Anyway,
should, yeah.
a near miss.
Oh, man.
There
See
should be a
now,
near hit. Don't you think it should be a near hit? We had a bunch
yeah,
of near hits today. Because if it was a near
yeah,
miss, that means they didn't hit it at all, or they nearly missed it.
yeah.
Anyway,
That's exactly right.
um, but
I
but
just,
to talk about those different things, and then maybe even share what effect it's had on the
yeah.
books. Now they don't have to share numbers, but just say
Oh,
we're doing big because of that. Well, that's more
yes.
of a motivational thing, and people. Well, then you're enabling people to become productive and effective by doing that.
So, Chris Pavisi and I, and his video, I just uploaded it, and I just did an advertisement for Shock Week, and I just
Mhm.
released that today. But he and I had this discussion and I related a conversation I had with a safety professional in a large electrical contracting firm. Harvey had a very well funded effort. And I asked him one time, I said, Harvey, how did you get this? I mean, you have no idea. Everybody had their personal protective equipment. All they had team meetings. They brought everybody together. He did it was almost like a small electrical safety workshop perspective,
Mhm.
right? And I asked him, how does he get it funded? And he goes, Tom, he goes, I talk two ways. He says, when I talk to my people and my workers and everybody that's, our trade people that are out in the field, he says, it's about going home. It's about earning a living. It's about making sure you can still earn that living and avoiding all of these catastrophes that could basically change your whole career, right? And he says, but
Mhm.
when I talk to senior leadership, it's about the bottom line. It's about, look, we avoided these OSHA violations. We
Yeah.
avoided all of these. And it's about, you know what, we were able to bid these projects
Yeah.
because we don't have these recordable incidents and we're keeping our recordables lower. We're able to bid certain jobs that other contractors can't bid. And he relates safety to the bottom line of the business. He goes, "You
Yeah.
have to learn to talk both ways." And
Yeah.
he is so right. And Chris Bavisi and I had a great discussion, which is a great lead in to just
Yeah.
advertise that, hey, go check out that other video, Shark Week video with Chris
Yeah.
Bavisi, because it's
Yeah.
along the same lines. And that's what I love about these videos when you're talking to different people. It all overlaps. It's so
Yes.
awesome.
Well,
Awesome.
you're looking at individual pieces here, but if you see all the videos, you get the whole picture. You get a
Yeah.
better picture. And when you're talking to upper management, you're talking to the bean counters and so forth. The question that I ask is a scheduled shutdown cheaper than an unscheduled shutdown? What do
That's
you
right.
think?
Yeah.
And so when
Yeah.
they begin to look along those lines, we're not selling out safety for money. This is just as big a part of it as anything
Sure.
else, because we're looking out for humans, for people, and property, and so it
Yep.
goes right along with it there. So having those regular safety talks and developing that safety culture, and you know, mentors, having people in your organization that buy into this and teach them how to mentor others, how to set the example themselves. How often is it that they say, don't do this, the next time you do, they're doing it? Well,
Yeah.
all the employees look at that and go, well, he's not walking the walk or talking the talk or things like that. But try to help people understand how important that is, that what you think, say, or feel, and your attitude towards it's going to reflect a lot on the workers that are under your supervision, or that you're working with, or maybe it's
S-
somebody that you're training and so forth.
Yeah.
Part of the training should be not just that you do it this way and you cut this way, but included in that the awareness of what could happen and the likelihood of occurrence and what could happen, the severity of the outcome,
Yep.
having that as a basis or a foundation to expand from there. And then the next one, we've done three already. Just to recap: have
Yeah.
markings and signage, create posters that display safety policies, have regular safety talks, not once
Yep.
a year, okay?
Yep.
Then four is to provide the personal protective equipment regularly, make sure that it's being used properly, asking questions. Um, at this point, what's wrong with
Oh,
management, or even the person giving the job box talk? Ask them, what do you guys think about this? How do you feel about what you're hearing? You
you
think
know
it's a bunch
what?
of Yahoo or what?
Oh,
Give
man.
me some feedback. You know what I'm saying?
You
So you're
know,
getting them engaged, you're getting them involved, and you're creating an environment that they feel safe to express what they're seeing. And I'm telling you, well, you know this,
yeah.
you talk to different people, and all of a sudden you're getting things you never thought about.
So here's my, you just sparked something in my, no pun intended. When you mentioned that, when you mention about engaging with people about
Yeah.
PPE, just think if you could take some time, even on a project,
Mm-hmm.
to where as a leader, or as a leader in the industry, and when I say a leader, it doesn't need to be senior leadership. It could be the
Right.
the foreman on a job
Yep.
site, to
Yep.
to take a team who's
Yeah.
maybe either we're on a job site working and they're doing their thing, and just say, okay, guys, let's take a break. Let's pull all of us together. Let's take a look at each of us on how we're dressed. Talk about the personal protective equipment that we're wearing, and the value it provides. You could take
Yeah.
on the job site, and you can, and remember, better than I do, when you're teaching somebody, the more senses that we use,
Yeah.
the better off it will stick. So if you take those moments, then just take 5 minutes and say, hey,
Yeah.
come on over here and let's just have a chat as a team
Yeah.
and talk about, it doesn't even have to be about PPE. It can be about, hey, let's
Yeah.
take a look. We've
Yep.
got ropes over here. We've got this. We've got all these, the barriers. And
Yep.
maybe in those discussions, you might even identify a deficiency,
Yep.
you
Yeah.
know and then
Absolutely.
make the correction as it is. It's not that the efficiency should drive the interaction, but the interaction could result in a lot of different things. And I think that those little moments will probably stick
Yep.
longer in their heads
Oh,
than a
absolutely.
classroom would.
Well, and it's because people feel valued. They
Yeah,
feel engaged.
absolutely.
They feel like they're part of the team. Now, would you rather supervise people that are there because they have to be there and they don't really
Yeah,
want to be there and they're thinking about everything else at home that's going wrong? Or would
right.
you rather, supervise people who are on the team? They're there, they're focused, and they like that because they
Yeah,
feel valued for their input. And I always tell the people in the class, this is a safe zone. Okay, we're here to learn.
yeah,
So it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. You know, that's already been decided by a higher power. Okay, it's
right.
incorrect or correct. Okay, and so you're safe here, and nobody's going to laugh at you for a wrong answer in
Yep.
class. Later on, they might talk about it, but we have no control over that. But
Yeah,
but you get
yeah,
on the same level and grasp. If you care about your topic as an instructor and you care about the industry and you care about safety and you care about other people, if
yeah.
you're focused on that, not what you're trying to say or how you look, people are going to sense that. And they're going to, deep down, I think everybody cares at some level. Nobody really wants to see anybody else get hurt, right? I mean, that's kind of
That's
a
right.
given.
Yeah, yeah.
And if they do, they're in the wrong business, right?
I agree.
So being able to recognize that and engage people and get their input, and it could be a guy that just walked on the job for the first day.
That's right.
Hey, what's your impression of this? He might ask a question. Why are we doing this way? And everybody will look at that and go, "Oh, I don't know. We've always done it that way. Why do we do it that way?" And that prompts a
Absolutely.
discussion, right?
Yep.
So uh, safety talks, providing the appropriate personal protective equipment,
Hmm.
walking them through it, taking and making sure everybody's familiar with it, comfortable with it, because you got everybody looking out. You might not see something, they might see it and correct it right away. But then
Yeah.
have them share that correction and then make sure to commend those for at the end of the day or at some point for the work that they've done. You did a safe job today. Here's what you did that was safe, blah, blah, blah. Here's the effect it has on the team and effect on the company.
Oh, that
You know
just
what I'm
dawned
saying?
on me. Yeah, and you know what? Chris Pavisi brought the same thing up. You know what he used
Yeah.
to do? They would on a job site, they would get they when they got their work done, they had like a barbecue. And it was
Yeah.
it was like a reward for the
Yeah.
entire crew, right? It was the
Yeah.
best
Yeah.
spend of money. It wasn't expensive, to get
Yeah.
some barbecue brought in and pop and
Yep.
whatnot at the end. He says, and the other crews would get envious of them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was their reward for not having any injuries, not having any incidents or reportables, and getting things done safe. And it was all driven around this awareness, and it helps build the culture.
Yeah.
It really
Remember at
does.
the very beginning, we talked about safety awareness is the habit of thinking about the
Yeah,
possibility that someone could get hurt or property could get damaged. And we do that before we start a task. And we proactively practice the practice of protection and
yeah.
be willing to take the action to control or eliminate it. And look at what it's doing for us as a team. Look at what it's doing for us as a business, making sure that you come in for that also.
Right. Yep.
Your personal protective equipment. Now, in 130, it talks about personal protective equipment in NFPA 70E. It
Yep.
goes through your gloves, it goes through your footwear. There's a lot of personal protective equipment. And if you take the time to research, and maybe that's something that you should have as a ongoing series of job talks. Here's our protective equipment. Why don't we wear tennis shoes? And why don't we, elastic
Sure.
in our underwear could wind up melting to our body and
Yep.
so forth because of heat transfer. Just little things like that to get creative. I mean, there's a lot of creative people out there, but
Oh yeah.
the way we want to do it is to reach people and engage them. The next one is to involve the employees in the development and the implementation of safety protocol. Just like what we've
Okay.
talked about, get them involved, get them engaged. Here's what we have for a safety program. As a company, here's what the employer's done. Now, you, the workers, you guys out here trying to work in this field, what do you think about that? How do you feel about that? And let them express themselves freely.
So would you say so what you're saying is getting them involved in the development of the safety
Yes,
program. So
yes.
it could be a suggestion box. It could be
Mhm.
It could be something to where you have the documents out there that are in track
Hmm.
changes, and you ask people, "Hey,
Yeah.
go put your comments in. What would you change?"
Yeah.
And then, like if you did it like we do with the code panels, right?
Yeah. Exactly. That's just what I was
Yeah,
thinking of. Yeah.
public inputs, right?
Yeah. Public
And then
input, public comments.
yeah,
And
and
then
that's
and then you
ownership.
could have a report on those comments. Now,
Yeah.
this is we're not talking about, the whole huge thing here. These are just
No,
ideas that you can adapt and modify to your business, your
that's right.
employees, and so forth. But anytime you're doing something to improve this safety awareness, the rest of it's going to kind of fall into place a little bit, because they've got to be aware of what's going on first and
Yeah.
why it needs to happen that way. Then they're motivated to be able to do the rest of the things. And
Yeah.
number six here is use creative tactics to introduce safety measures.
Whoa, creative tactics
Yes.
to
Yep.
introduce safety measures. What's the creative? Give
Yep.
me some examples here. This is
Well, it mentions here that introducing safety protocols in a typical presentation style can get boring and repetitive, and
yeah.
that's true. Slide programs can go so far, but if you create a safety scavenger hunt, okay, where employees are
Oh,
split into teams and they have to read clues to piece together a safety policy.
you know what?
Maybe give them an assignment, different assignments as part of this safety plan that you're going to put together, assign for this and assign for that, a couple or two, you know what I'm saying? And then have everybody bring that in and read through all of it, right?
Okay, so here's my thought process. This sparked something else in my memory here because when I was working down at the Busman facility, our leaders all had we were required that we put on our vest and put our safety boots on. We had the clipboard and we had to walk the plant floor to identify any safety issues. We had to spend so many hours a
Right.
month being going out and collecting that information. Now they did that from a leadership perspective because what
Yeah.
that did was it brought ownership from the
Yep.
leaders into the safety program, and then the thought process was that will trickle down to
Yeah.
each of the departments because if you get your senior leaders who are engaged from a safety perspective and walking the plant floor looking for any place where you see a safety concern or a safety violation to identify it and take pictures of it and then they we had to review that as a leadership team to um, to make sure that they were
Yeah.
addressed, right? And in some cases what was perceived as a safety concern wasn't a safety concern and then
Yeah.
it becomes a teaching moment for everybody involved.
Yeah. You hit upon it right there. Take this as an opportunity to have teaching moments.
Yeah,
Let them practice what they're learning. Let them
that's right.
put and implement these policies and report back their
Yeah.
results. How did that feel? And we're not trying to take away from the work that needs to get done. That's you know, we're not
That's
trying to
right.
say, we're just trying to say be aware of this.
That's
Train
right.
yourself to be aware of it. Talk about it. Create that culture. Here's another one: hosting a workplace safety trivia session with prizes.
Oh,
The employee that
trivia.
answers the questions correctly, right?
Oh man, that is an interesting one. I love the trivia.
Yeah.
I
Well,
love
and
it.
that's just one of many things. I mean, you get out
Yeah.
in companies are wanting to do this, I believe,
Right.
but they don't know how to do this or necessarily why we can do this, and they don't know that they do have some creative measures because 70E is not a law; it's a guide. It's a guide for
That's right.
right for electrical safety. You can't just
Yeah.
take 70 and say that's my safety program. No, you have
Yeah.
to adapt it to your company and make sure that
That's
you are
right.
able to tie all that together and get everybody on board.
And and I'll tell you the hardest one in which I think the awareness this whole discussion really plays a key part of in the electrical safety program 110.3 there
Mhm.
is a um, there is a section in here. I'm looking for it right now. Where is it? Uh,
110.3 is the electrical safety program. We got
yeah,
parenthetical A, general, B, inspection, C, condition of maintenance. D is awareness and self-discipline. There's a whole
that's
paragraph on
okay.
awareness and self-discipline.
So
We're trying to
that's the
talk
hard
about
one.
what does that mean?
Yeah, yeah, because I in fact I remember having this discussion with Derek Vikstol. I said, um, it says the program shall be developed to provide the required self-discipline for
Yeah,
all employees who must perform work that may involve electrical hazards. So I'm looking at that saying, how do you A, develop a program that says we're going to give you self-discipline? And then how do you monitor whether or not it's actually happening? Because what that's all about, in my opinion, is what you do when no one's watching.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's
And
just one
not
of
just
those,
what you do, but what I do when no
yeah,
one's watching. You got to make it personal. And in
yeah.
that word discipline, sometimes people get that mixed up with punishment.
Oh,
Okay,
I know.
discipline
Yeah.
is not punishment. Discipline
No,
is training yourself. For example, if you're going to, a disciplined runner is going to run the steps of the stadium to get himself in shape.
that's right.
Okay, to discipline, you do certain weight regimes and diet regimes. Well, when it comes to self-discipline or electrical safety, we need them to understand, what am I personally going to do to contribute to this
That's right.
safety program?
That's
And
right.
you got to really think deep and ask yourself. You know thyself, I believe, was the term Derek used. Know thyself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes when you're doing this self-examination, you may want to think of having somebody else do that with you, because
Oh,
you might not
absolutely.
admit certain things. And if you're doing it regularly or like you're supposed to do it, you'll accept counsel from friends a lot of times. You might
Yep.
not like it, but you might say that's not a bad idea. But
Yeah.
that's part of what the safety program is. I think that's what awareness is, why they put that there, because there's so much more involved in it than just PPE.
Oh,
And,
absolutely right. Yes.
just tangible things. We have to train the individual, we have to train ourselves, type of thing, and give them a reason to do it. The
Yeah.
workers are doing it because they want to go home.
Yeah.
And part of some of the things, that the results of not doing it. But let's also talk about the results of doing safe things. What
Yeah.
are the benefits? What does it mean? What am I getting out of it? What is my family getting out of it? That sort
Yeah.
of thing.
We always talk about the negative aspects of everything, but
Mhm.
you're right. It's a we need to. I tell you, where there's two places where I um I started that. One was with NEMA. We always, like, on the arc fault circuit interrupters. We always talk about the statistics of how many fires there are and all of these things. And as part of that, we had a NEMA AFCI task group, which deals with the marketing and awareness and education. And what we started to do there was to advertise or make aware of the benefits of it. So we called it the found problems, where we identified there were some product recalls, some lights that were recalled by the CPSC, and it was because the AFCIs were tripping. It was because they were finding the problems. We have cases of where the AFCIs were prevented electrical fires, and I said those are the success stories. We need to talk about the success stories. I did the same thing. I wrote an IEEE paper with Ken White on the arc flash reduction maintenance switch. He had a tremendous life-saving event where they employed technology. They had an event, and everybody went home safely, and no one was even close to danger injury,
Yeah,
because of the technology. But I call it the rubberneck syndrome. It's
yeah.
like we're so attracted to death and destruction and explosions that,
Well, we're programmed by Hollywood, right? No.
yeah, well, no, it's not, it's so freaking
Yeah, in
true.
Hollywood it makes money. Out here you lose money.
Yeah,
In reality, you lose the money,
yeah,
right?
that's
Yeah.
right.
Well,
Yep,
and we're training ourselves then to
yep,
respond, not
yeah,
to react all the time. And
that's
we
right.
respond with good habits. And self-awareness is the very start of that. Now, On the flip side of that, the benefits, when safety awareness is up,
Yep.
injuries are down.
Yep.
Okay, better productivity, cutting
Absolutely.
down on safety shortcuts,
Yeah.
half measures and things like that. But
Yeah.
people being really committed to themselves and to others and to their families and their jobs and their companies and things like that. So
Yep.
it's that's not the way people are taught to act in this day and age.
Oh,
It's
that's
kind of
exactly
like
right.
you know me myself and I, regardless of the cost, and so we got to fight against that. And one way to do that is be aware of it and
Yeah.
not get mad at people for it, but just say, hey, here's if you see a situation that needs to be corrected, most people aren't going to get mad at the situation.
No.
They're going
Yeah.
to think about how to solve the situation. We got to really train ourselves to be able to do that. And
Yep.
it's just like anything else. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
That's exactly
So
right.
practice, practice, practice. How do you
And
become a safe worker? Practice,
yep.
practice, practice.
And awareness helps
Mhm.
change a culture.
Yeah,
I think that that aspect of the hierarchy of risk controls is important to understand, to your point, how it is a foundation. It can be a
yeah,
foundation
yep,
for
yep,
changing the culture. I mean, we see it in so many places, and this 110.3D
yeah,
is one I
yeah.
scratch my head on, but
But
I
there's
like the
different types. There's
discussion on that.
different types of awareness there, isn't there? There's
Yeah,
situational awareness. There's self-awareness. There's
yeah,
condition awareness. There's environmental awareness. There's being aware of, when you stop and think about it, do a little research or have a discussion like this. Hopefully,
yeah,
this isn't all inclusive, but maybe it will spark something when people see this and review this, and they'll start looking at their own companies and use that creative juices within themselves,
oh,
if you will.
absolutely, yeah,
And now we've given them a few things to look at. But really, if you're looking at it, the sky's the limit as long as it's within the boundaries, right? You gain
absolutely,
freedom within rules. And I like to
yeah,
look at it there, give this example. People don't like rules. Well, you know what? If I follow the rules of the driving manual, I'm free to go anywhere. If
that's
I don't
true.
follow those rules, guess what? I get my license taken away or I'm put away from society in a jail so I don't harm somebody or myself.
That's right.
So rules are good. They're there to protect people, not restrict people. And
Yeah,
we've got to try and get that point engaged in. And here's how we do it: awareness, awareness,
absolutely,
and self-discipline.
absolutely, and we can't go everything. Everything can be done in excess. We can't
Yeah,
go overboard because
yeah,
there has to be a happy medium.
yeah,
Because you get this, what you don't want are individuals on the team or in the
yep,
organization to throw up the barriers to say
yeah,
you're just trying to control me.
yeah, yeah,
You're extending this beyond the safety
yeah.
aspect. So
Overreach, I believe,
you're
is the term.
yes, that's the word I was looking for. You don't want to overreach your boundaries. You see, like to your
Yeah,
point, you've got to keep this. I'll give you an example. I was in one facility at one point, and we were going to walk from the office over to a test facility, and in that process, we had to walk. They were between the yellow lines, right? So you had to walk down this pathway, which went through the manufacturing facility. Well, before we went out there, they were like, we're very safety conscious here, so they told us to remove all of our, um, remove your necklace, remove your rings, and you had to put hair nets on, and it was, and all we were doing was walking from point A to point B. Removing the rings and putting the hair nets on to control your hair is something that if I'm working around equipment, right? But that's not what we're doing. And if I got anywhere near that, that means I didn't follow the fundamental safety aspect of
yeah,
staying within the lines, right?
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
in that organization, they went to the nth
yeah.
degree, and then
Extremes.
they went to the extreme, and what that ended up doing was it
Yeah,
desensitized everybody
yeah,
because they
yeah,
said any of these safety requirements are ridiculous. So
yeah,
you
yeah,
really got to be careful and
yeah.
be practical with it all.
Well, and that's why
Very
you need to
important.
get everybody engaged, the
Oh
workers,
yeah.
the supervisors,
Yes.
and I always heard somebody say you got to be balanced. So do you know what the definition of balance is?
What?
Neglecting all things equally.
Oh, okay. That's very balanced. I'm just gonna, that's like saying
You're
if you,
doing everything that you possibly
yeah,
can, but you're just
yeah,
that's kind of how it works out if you're truly balanced. And
absolutely.
being willing that if you're off balance to correct that. And
Yeah.
see, that's part of the awareness too. Being aware of when you're in the extremes and being aware when you're not being as extreme as you should be, right?
Oh,
And so,
absolutely. Yeah.
because there's
Yeah.
both sides of the spectrum
Oh,
there.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
anyway, this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. This little
Sh-
bit of research I did, but it shows you a whole new world out there. And that's why 70E, there's so much there. Don't let it overwhelm you. Okay,
That's
you
right.
start a 1,000-mile journey one step at a time, right? You eat an elephant one
Absolutely.
bite at a time, but you keep eating and you keep growing, right?
Ah, I now is it a chocolate elephant?
Any elephant, okay? It doesn't make any difference. You might need some nourishment or something, some flesh to eat on. I don't know. Um,
You ain't right. You know that? You ain't
yeah,
right.
I
I
know.
love it. I love it. But I liked where you started. Informative Annex Q, human performance and workplace
Yeah,
electrical safety, very critical for the self-awareness and situational awareness and understand our own limitations as human beings. And then we went into 110 dot, was it 3H? No, man, where's the
3H is a hierarchy of risk control methods,
yes.
and
Yep,
it's
and then
H3.
3H, that's risk assessment.
3H3, 3H33,
There it is. Yeah,
or
there it
4,
is. Yeah,
3H34. It's awareness.
yeah, yeah.
And
So it's 110.3H, and then
yes,
3 is hierarchy of risk control methods, and then
correct.
4 is
And then 4.
awareness.
Yep.
Yeah,
And the awareness is what
is
what
what
we
we're
tried to
focusing
focus on
on
here
right
today.
now.
And in a lot of my programs now, I'm trying to spend a little bit of time in Annex Q. Uh,
That's
it's
a good
just
place.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Um, there's a rule-based mode, and there's uh, experience-based mode. If you
yep,
understand how people work, and a lot of people that may see this or may start off with 70E, and well, how do I reach people? We'll go back to NXQ, and it will give you a pretty good idea of human
absolutely.
behavior that
Yep,
you can pick and choose that you need to. It might give you some good ideas, and then use your own thought process and so forth to make it personal and to reach out and get them engaged. We want
absolutely
to be
right.
able to enable people to be effective and productive and safe.
Absolutely. And this whole awareness peppers throughout 70E. You have
It does.
110.4 training requirements.
Yep.
That's all about
Yep.
awareness. And even
Yeah.
110.10, where we talk about equipment use and using them in accordance with manufacturer's instructions, training and education on how to use a proper tooling. And you mentioned that earlier as
Yep.
well.
Yep.
So you could go down through 70E and find all of these
Yep.
various aspects that
Yes.
are all focused on awareness, hazard
Mhm.
awareness, situational awareness, personal development awareness, the whole bit.
Yep.
I
The
love
fact
it.
that even if you change a tool, changing a tool
Oh
may
yeah,
make a huge difference. Changing anything. In these types of videos are really, really good because they raise the awareness of
yeah,
what it is we should focus on and some good interaction on what we can do about it and some discussion about how it affects you
yep.
or me or what we've seen in the field and so forth. And that's one of the things I like the IAEI Tuesday and the Friday questions that you have because you get people from all over the globe
Oh
talking
yeah.
back and forth, and it is a discussion, not just somebody there going through a PowerPoint program. And even in
Yeah.
the classes, if you can get the ones in the class engaged in
Oh yeah.
discussion in some manner, they're going to remember that a lot better
Oh
than
my
a perfect
goodness.
slide that you did.
Yep. And then everybody, so I was doing a 70E training class over in New York. And during the we we're going through slides and we're talking about things. but I keep prodding, and you do this as well. You
Yeah.
prod people, you ask questions, and then you could see the class blossom because at the beginning
Yeah.
everybody's quiet, and then
Yeah.
we crescendoed into the middle of the
Yep.
class, and we had
Yep.
I was sitting, Robert. I'll tell you what, I was sitting there, standing there in front of the class, watching
Yep.
two individuals talking.
Directing
Uh,
the chorus. Here's
exactly,
the
and
drummer. Here's the.
I had goosebumps. At one point, I had goosebumps because I was learning something,
Yeah.
and I'm listening just like everybody else is, and that to me is the best way to teach. The best professor. I had
Yeah.
a gentleman when I started at Eaton, and I was helping in a training class, and I knew this topic, and it was a physical thing, so it was how we connected the equipment together. And there was one student there who could not get things to communicate. We had Modbus RTU, we had Modbus TCP, we had a few other protocols, and we were connecting it all together. And I went in and I was like, oh well, you have this wrong, and I'm correcting it. And the gentleman who was there, he walked over to me and he told me to stop. And I mean, he was stern, and he says, "Stop." And I looked at him. I was like, "What?" And he goes, "Come here." And he looked at the gentleman who was there, and he says, "Continue." And he looked at me, and he goes, "Don't do for the student what the student can do for themselves."
Yeah. Yes.
It's the
Yes.
hardest part is to
It
is to
is.
let go and let the development proceed. He goes, he's going to make mistakes, and that is a part of the learning process.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
just have to learn to keep our hands and know as educators and individuals in whatever environment we're in, we need to stimulate those conversations and let them take hold of themselves and not try to dominate it, you know?
Yeah. Let them have accountability.
Exactly.
Okay. If they
Yeah,
don't have accountability, you're not going to be there all the time to look over their shoulder. So if
absolutely
they
right.
make that mistake and they own it and that sort of thing. So just
Yep.
just to recap quickly here,
Yes.
we understood what electrical safety is. It's the habit of thinking about the possibility that someone can get hurt or that property can get damaged and doing that before a task is started. The proactive practice of protection, the PPP, proactive practice of protection
Protection.
that each individual is responsible for, to
Hmm.
recognize hazards, be willing to take action to control or eliminate. The six ways: have marking and signage, create posters that display safety policies,
Yep.
have regular safety talks, provide appropriate personal protective equipment regularly, and involve employees in the development and implementation of protocol, and use creative tactics to introduce safety measures. So just a few things
Yeah.
in our discussion here today. There's a lot more, but we don't want to overwhelm people. But we also want to tell them there's hope. I mean, you can do this. Start off small, but the point is start.
Yeah.
Don't just don't freeze up and don't do anything at all because you don't know
Absolutely
what to
right.
do. Reach out and engage everybody, not just the higher ups, but engage
Yeah.
everybody as a
Yeah.
team effort.
And know that whenever you start, if you've just begun this journey in your organization,
Mhm.
10 years from now or 5 years from now, you're going to look back at that first safety plan you put together and your educational efforts, and you're going to go, wow, how how different I am today than
Yeah.
when I was
Yep.
back then. Because
Yeah.
you're going to continue to learn, you're going to continue to modify and change your
Yeah.
practices, build your awareness programs, you're going to change the culture within your own organization. And it's not a bad thing to say, I'm sitting here today looking back at where my organization was 10 years
Mhm.
ago or 1 year ago, and say,
Mhm.
look how much progress I have made.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. But to your point, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And give yourself some credit. You started. You
Yeah.
became aware of what you needed. You developed your awareness portion of that all the way through, and you're looking back on it now. When we first started using seatbelts to kind of tie that back together, we weren't aware of how important that was, right?
That's right.
And we did things like, well, I remember the discussion you had with Derek. You'd either click it and sit on top of it, or you'd take a scissors and cut them out.
Yeah.
When they first became
Yeah.
onto the market. But now look, nobody gives it a second thought. In fact, you feel undressed if you don't have your seatbelt on.
That's
You
exactly
know,
right. Yep.
so in my line of thinking, a seatbelt and a speedo, you're dressed for anything. But anyway, Tom, you
Oh
never know when
man.
it's going to drop off into oblivion. It'll come back, but
Oh
it
my
happens.
gosh. That's insane. I love it. I love it.
Okay, well, what do you think?
Robert,
Have
I
we been
think
here for an hour?
we have been here for here's the thing. I think we got them you got the message across. You went through your six items, and we had some good discussion around awareness. I'm going to look forward to see if there are any comments to the video and see how people come up with their own ideas. Because
Yeah,
remember, what they can do is they can comment on this video and
yeah,
have any of their
absolutely.
ideas on around. And I
Yep.
like the focus of awareness because it does play a lot. So I think we did. I think we did. I think you did. Obvious.
Well,
You
thanks
are
for letting
just
me
a
have the
breath
privilege and the
of fresh
opportunity
air.
to do it.
You are a breath of fresh air, so I know everybody out there always enjoys your comments, and I love the fact we got to do more videos together. That's for sure.
Yeah,
And
well,
and let
I
me,
try to
you,
make myself available to support, because what you're doing to support that's pretty
yeah.
important.
So you do educational. Why don't you tell people a little bit about what you do, and maybe there's someone out there who can benefit from having you on a project or at their site.
Well, I've been in the trade since 1973, which is almost 50 years.
Hmm.
Okay, and so it wasn't until about 2006 that I really began to educate myself. So I've gotten certifications, IAEI, inspector certification, ICC, certified by NFPA as a CSCP. I've reached out and got the NABCEP certification for PV inspection and design and so forth. And I worked as an electrical inspector in Nebraska for 6, 8 months during a pretty traumatic time with floods and so forth. I work with power companies. I work with inspectors. I work with contractors. I see a need for teaching the basics like electrical theory and so forth. So I have
Hmm.
classes that are available to do that. If they want to go to the website, continuingelectricaleducation.com. Okay. I also do electrical system reviews. The reason I call them electrical system reviews is so that the local inspectors, we don't get confused. I
Hmm.
support them. And so what I tell people in my reports is not enforceable unless you wind up going to court. And then the courts
Yeah.
will ask you, why didn't you do what this certified individual said that you should do? And then the courts will take care of that. I work with insurance companies. We have a couple of them that have had me go through stem to stern, from the transformer secondary to the last receptacle, and write up a review of the whole system. And I test it, I look at it, I take pictures and put that all together and give a report. And then the insurance companies have said, okay, you need to fix these items or we can't insure you because you're not up. So 70B comes into play.
Oh yeah,
And
maintenance. Yeah.
I've tried to include that in I'm going to use a term here. I don't know if it's a copyright term, but the electrical cycle of safety. You ever heard of that? Electrical
The,
cycle of safety?
no, I've not heard the
Okay,
electrical
yeah, it's
cycle.
NFPA 70 on installation,
Hmm.
70E on working on it, and 70B on maintenance. The electrical
Oh,
cycle of safety.
okay. I call it the
Okay.
trilogy.
Yeah, the trilogy,
Yeah.
electrical cycle of safety. But I've got all of these things. What I did was, if I'm going to educate somebody, I need to educate myself. So I'm constantly trying
Yeah.
to improve that education, not to make myself look good, but so that I'm available and able to enable
Right.
people to be effective and productive in whatever they're doing. That's my goal.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Robert, thank you for a great Shock Week, and thanks for contributing and for everything that you do for electrical safety and the electrical industry.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you, Tom, for what you do too. You're an inspiration, and keep up the good work, and don't burn yourself out.
I hear you. I hear you.
And here's some words to live by, Tom. Sumo wrestling's not for everybody.
Oh, that's true. I like it. I like it a lot. All right, brother.
All right, I got to jump on a PV solar class. I'm late.
All right, go do it. We'll see you.
All right, take care. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Bye.